Hey everyone, it's Horror Free for All, and I hope you're doing well today. I have here a movie review of a film that came out in 2019, but technically finished wrapping up filming in 2017 when it was under a specific brand that I'll get into shortly. It was directed by Lars Klevberg, who directed the Child's Play remake, and it was written by Blair Butler, who wrote movies like Hellfest. And the movie in question is Polaroid. Now, Polaroid has been on my to-be watched for a long time. For some reason, I just never got around to actually sitting down and watching it. And the only reason why I wanted to watch it originally was for the idea that it's a PG-13 horror film that has a similar idea to one of my childhood favorite Goosebumps books called Say Cheese and Die. And after watching this movie, I can't help but think that this is one of the worst horror films I have ever fucking seen. It's fucking so bad. Everything that is wrong with generic PG-13 horror is wrong here, but put on full blast. Not only is the concept fucking dog shit, and for some reason it fumbles the bag when Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark even back in the day laid a fucking great blueprint for this type of shit. I really don't get how the writer of Hellfest, which is probably one of the more fun indie horror films to come out in the past 10 years, and Lars Klevberg, who I thought actually made a pretty decent remake with Child's Play, how they made this piece of shit is mind-boggling. But one fun fact about this movie, not a lot of people know, back to the 2017 factoid I shared briefly earlier, this movie was actually finished in 2017, and it was going to be released under Dimension Films, which it technically did get released after it got bought out due to the Weinstein brothers getting that controversy years back. So technically, this was the last official Weinstein brothers movie ever made, which is mind-boggling. And how they went from, I think one of their first movies ever was The Burning, which is one of the most underrated slasher masterpieces in the slasher subgenre, in my opinion. And then they ended on this piece of fucking garbage. It just shows how long, time kind of overstays its welcome with certain creators. And good riddance, the Weinsteins are gone. But, yeah, this film fucking sucked ass. So, I would not recommend anybody take any time to watch this, unless maybe you're morbidly curious, or you have some weird fascination about these PG-13 horror films from the 2000s and 2010s that all kind of blend together. If you like movies like Bye Bye Man, One Missed Call, if you like the Prom Night remake and bullshit like that, you might like this, but don't waste your fucking time if you haven't seen it, okay? So, this is all you really need to know about the story. I'm going to give a brief synopsis of the film. I'm not going to give any spoilers. I'm just going to give you a general rundown of what to expect, and then we'll get into the review. So, the movie is about this camera who is said to have had a previous owner who inscribed the initials of their name on the back of it. And it's this really nice Polaroid camera, I think from the 70s. I'm not big on cameras, so if you're a camera junkie out there, don't flame me in the comments. I really don't know what the fuck I'm looking at here. But, this teenage girl has come into the possession of this camera and thinks it'll be a fun idea to snap a selfie of herself with the Polaroid while she's there. And while the picture is developing, her friend realizes that it's taking too long and she has to leave. And once her friend leaves, the girl is left at her house all by herself. And let's just say the picture, as it's developing, starts to reveal perhaps something was behind her in the selfie. It might be in the house chasing after her. And we get an answer of what's going to happen to this girl, and it cuts to the title sequence. And then we get caught up to the main character of the story. Now, we have another teenage girl who is essentially, kind of friends with a group of people, kind of not. I mean, she's social, but she's kind of weird and awkward. And this is the angle they're going with. She may or may not have this guy interest in her life as well. Well, one of her so-called friends find this camera and think that it would be a fun idea to give it to her. I think that's how it went in the story. And when she acquires the camera, she, of course, wants to take a photo with her friends as they're, out having a night of, fun at a party, dressed up. And after she takes the photos, weird stuff starts happening to her friends. And one by one, as you can probably guess, whatever we thought we saw in the photo from the beginning of the film might be coming back to essentially kill this girl's friends. All off screen. There's no on-screen fucking death in this entire movie. And as the story goes along, the survivors in this friend group start to notice that there's some weird phenomenon going on with the pictures. They think as they've seen the pictures develop, they see this being in this photo. And every time somebody dies, the being kind of moves to the next photo of who's next in the order, I guess. And this builds up and builds up as we see more and more people die, essentially. And it's very surface level drama and character interactions and bullshit like that. And then we get to the climax where, of course, the being might be put on the forefront, and we get to see what the characters do involving said being. And then we get the answers by the end and get the conclusion. So, without giving too much away, that's essentially what you're going to expect out of Polaroid. Now, here's the thing about the film. I struggle having any positives with it, but if I had one saving grace about the movie, one thing I really can appreciate, like genuinely, is I think the film is competently made. I don't think that it is great in terms of music or color hues or editing, CGI, acting all that much. But I can appreciate that the film has some polished touch to it. And of course, it being a studio film, it's going to have that look. But I can appreciate that about Lars Klevberg's directing. He at least made the movie somewhat appealing to watch. Not saying that the movie's entertaining or anywhere near good to make it worth the watch, but it's not hard to look at, minus some aspects we'll get into in the negatives. But yeah, I can appreciate that about the movie. And when it comes to the concept itself about a camera that kind of predicts the future, but not really, here's the thing. Goosebumps did this idea with Say Cheese and Die, hence my interest of wanting to watch this movie. And that book is about a kid who comes across this evil camera, and when he takes a photo of somebody, it predicts a terrible outcome for them. And this movie tries to have that aspect to it, like the predecessor even of Say Cheese and Die, and I think the Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, The Tale of the Curious Camera. It came from that Twilight Zone camera episode. The Tale of the Most Unusual Camera, I think that's what it is called. They're trying to borrow from that trope here, where the photo predicts something bad is going to happen. But because this is a generic PG-13 horror film, for some reason you have to have some haunted being in the camera, which the movie definitely alludes to, and you learn about what all's going on with that in the film, don't get me wrong. But I just think that direction isn't that good. But there's something about the idea of a killer camera that could carry a film. And if this movie proves anything, somebody else take this idea and run with it. Except steer away with the direction they went. Maybe go towards the Goosebumps route. And we could have had a charming PG-13 horror film a la something like Goosebumps. As a matter of fact, all you needed to do was take that Say Cheese and Die book and make it a full movie if you really wanted to, or maybe make it in spirit, but take the plot and run with it. I think people would have rather seen the Say Cheese and Die ripoff than this butchered fucking mess. But I digress. Other than that, maybe some, okay acting performances. Nothing special here from the lead girl and the side characters. They're all decent. Maybe not the material they were given, but they can act, I guess. I have a lot of fucking negatives with this movie. Off the bat, I'm going to get into, even though I said the movie looks competently made, the editing in this film is awful. Absolutely awful. When we're looking at the color hues, it's atrocious. This movie, I cannot stand when movies do this, and I see this a lot in generic PG-13 horror films, where it's just obscenely dark for no fucking reason to create some type of mood or atmosphere for kids to be like, ooh, it's dark, and then you get a jump scare out of it. It's bullshit. None of this shit works. And by the time this movie came out in 2019, people were already beating this shit over the head in 2006. So why are we keeping all these old fucking tropes alive with this garbage ass movie? I couldn't tell you. But yeah, getting down to everything else, the music in this movie is generic as fuck. The monster design, the CGI, the kills, laughable. The monster design in this movie would be scary if it was actually prosthetic, but it's full on CGI and it looks fucking like it's a goddamn video game. It's nothing to be scared at whatsoever. And then when you get to the CGI effects, down to the kills, down to there's a specific scene with a door where there's a cutaway where we see a CGI knife blowing through a door. This is the type of shit that horror fans are pissed off at, especially in PG-13 horror movies. I get it that you cannot show blood, you can't show nudity, you can't show graphic violence. That's fine. If you're going to make a PG-13 horror film, that's going to be a given. But for God's sake, the fucking CGI is overblown in this movie, and it looks like trash. Down to the design of the camera, it's just a regular Polaroid camera. There's nothing about it that makes it remarkable other than these fucking initials on the back, right? And when we're getting down to just the setting of the film, it's so goddamn generic. It's just a random small town. There's no heart and soul. There's no camaraderie with the community. There's no personality anywhere to be had in this film. It's just bland. This whole thing kind of feels like you're eating fucking plain grits with no flavoring. I know people in the South love grits. Tell me you would eat grits by itself without butter or cheese or bacon or whatever the fuck you put in it. That shit is the equivalent of watching this goddamn movie. It is just so mind-numbingly basic and bland and fucking boring. And soulless, to say the least. Now, when it comes down to the story, I'm not going to be too harsh on Blair Butler's script here. But here's the thing. When you have, I'm guessing, studio meddling going on here, because Dimension Studios, when it was around, was notorious for studio meddling. They would constantly be breathing down the necks of creators to make a product that they wanted or to fit, maybe budget. This film was filmed on an $8-something million budget when it was under Dimension. It went through, I guess, re-edits through them. The film was put on the shelf when Dimension got bought out. Whoever bought it re-released it, or I guess took the rights and released it, I guess, officially. The film only made less than $2 million, so it lost pretty much it only made back 1/8 of what they put into it. That should tell you why this movie turned up almost immediately on Netflix back in the day. I remember seeing it and I was like, okay. Then I saw people completely lambasting it. I looked at Rotten Tomatoes. I think this movie at one point, if it still does, I'll be shocked, had a 0% rotten. Because people thought this movie was just reminiscent of the fucking garbage from the mid-2000s. The story, what could have saved it, is the story and the concept. I'm telling you, like I said, the character performances are decent, but the characters are so dry. You don't feel any connection to these characters whatsoever because they're so superficially written. And the way the movie characterizes these kids, you really give two fucks about them. And the moments you do have with them when they are kind of isolated and dealing with these things, with this creature and these Polaroid photos, so to speak, it isn't even scary or tense because it's trying too hard to be jump scare fodder than to be something enriching and engaging and something that you would want to come back and revisit. That's the one thing that horror movies should always strive to do. And if you fail at that, you've already failed the movie. And the story is just not fucking good. It's not that good. Okay? Whatsoever. All right. And then getting down to, the studs here. This movie, by every stretch of the imagination, is uninspired. It is generic as fuck. Whether we're talking about how it's presented, how it's packaged. Obviously, the Weinsteins and Dimension wanted this neatly polished, neat PG-13 horror film just to throw out into the ether. And they're probably banking on kids at least showing up and getting $20 million out of the movie or something. Because back then, they were pretty much grasping at straws for money. I couldn't tell you why they wanted this movie to get made, but they did, right? So, looking at some other things, underneath the surface, the pacing is pretty all right, but it's kind of just barreling through things in the story, and by the time you get to the reveals of how this is working in terms of the monster and stuff, and you get the answers of what the monster possibly is, you just, like I said, about the other things, you just don't fucking care. Okay? And when we're looking at the poor attempts of humor, the cringe dialogue at times, or I guess I should say cringe line delivery, that doesn't help it either. It is what it is. I can really just keep going on and on and on and beat this film over the head if I really wanted to. But I have really nothing else to say about this movie other than I feel like I wasted over an hour and a half of my time watching this piece of shit. If there's anything that can be learned from Polaroid or movies like it, these vapid PG-13 horror films, is that what makes PG-13 an appealing rating for a film is for kids to be able to go see a horror movie made for them without having to sit with an adult like an R-rated movie. But you insult the intelligence of teens by making it too watered down. Instead of trying to make a supernatural slasher, why don't you just make a creepy concept with riveting characters? I don't know, like Arlstein does in Goosebumps. Save this rating for movies that are actually trying to appeal to that demographic. These type of PG-13 movies, when you have these teenage protagonists, you think that teenagers want to go see themselves portrayed on screen, but 9 times out of 10, kids are going to go see a movie like this and think it's fucking dog shit. Look at Tarot. Look at goddamn Imaginary. Look at all these PG-13 horror films in the past 15, 20 years that have completely bombed at the box office because they're trying to replicate this goddamn shit. The only PG-13 horror movie I think I've seen, and I think if this is the only one, that has had some sort of success, like legitimate success, is Megan. And even then, all Megan is a recycled clone of the Child's Play remake. And this is the same rinse repeat shit. These creators out in Hollywood, they see an idea that might work in Goosebumps and for kids horror, and then they're like, hey, let's Hollywoodify the script to make it as generic as possible so we can reach as much kids. And in doing so, all they do is they alienate the horror audience out there that actually might want to go check this movie out for the concept because they love that shit from Goosebumps. And when they go see it, they just can't help but think, man, I'd rather be reading a book for kids than watching a PG-13 horror film for kids and adults. So I digress. If I had to say anything else about Polaroid, I would say, unless you are interested in seeing how this killer camera concept might look in a Hollywood setting, don't waste your fucking time. If I had to rate this movie from a 0 to 5 star basis, I had some positives with it, but those positives are more so bleak compliments. I don't really find them to be saving graces or anything for this movie, because at the end of the day, I watched this and I said I have no interest in ever watching this movie again, and it made me full on hate it. I was sitting in the middle of the film, pretty much at the halfway point, and I told myself, I hate this movie. I hate everything that it stands for, everything that it's doing, and I hate what it represents. And fuck you, the Weinsteins. Good riddance. This was your last movie. You know, fun ride while it lasted, I guess. But I'd give this movie a 1 out of 5 stars. It's an absolute piece of fucking garbage. It's a dumpster fire riding down the river. Fucking let it sail away, let it burn up, and let it become a compost pile in the landfills to feed the creatures in the earth, because it deserves it. If you find this movie at a Goodwill, I want to be shocked. Fucking buy it, watch it, and then just throw it in the garbage. Or if you're out there streaming and you see this movie, pass it up. Don't even waste your fucking play button. Don't waste 2 hours of your time. Don't do it. Just don't do it. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Polaroid. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this fucking horrid ass movie. Do you love it? Do you hate it? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.